What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. Now, whenever I hear, oh, this era is the worst, I always think of past eras that could take the crown. For WWE, at least 1995 out of the main event scene, and some of the mid-carders was so bad. There was some stuff there that was borderline unwatchable. Others say 2018, which to me was the worst year I've ever watched for WWE. I just didn't care about anything. Sure, D. Bryan returned. Sure, AJ was champion, but I quickly lost interest. And to give you just an idea of how much WWE I watched in 2008, I only watched the Royal Rumble, Fastlane, and WrestleMania 34. Other than that, only bits and pieces here and there, and I never got back to watching full time until the road to WrestleMania 35. And if you put a gun to my head and ask me what happened during, say, June 2018, I won't know. But then there's an era which many believe is the absolute worst. Raw of 2009 to 2010. I can bear to watch the episodes for that time period because I was a kid back then. Just like any person that grew up with the new generation era can acknowledge it wasn't so good back then, but due to nostalgia, they can enjoy it. I can do that, but for this video today, I'm going to cover Raw 2009 to 2010. The bad and the good. From Donald Trump purchasing Raw all the way up to Bret Hart's return, I'm going to take a look at just about everything that is worth mentioning. Okay, you guys know how this goes. I go from the worst thing to the best thing. So yeah, right now let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to start off with is the horrible guest host idea. Now, why is this so hated? Well, the guys they bring in are there for the payday, and they don't even put effort into the job. Like, if I'm being paid to host whatever, doesn't matter, keeping up with the Kardashians, hell, I'm going to put 100% as it would be a disservice to the fans of the show. But then again, I'm not going to blame the host. WWE brings them in. The show didn't gain more viewers, it was just the wrestlers themselves that garnered ratings. Also, if they were hell-bent on the guest hosting, I think it would have been cool to see stars of old host on a weekly basis. You know how Trish Stratus and Ted DiBiase hosted? Something like that, but on a weekly basis, you bring somebody else. That probably would have gone down better because, well, for one, they wouldn't drag the show down with some cringe-worthy segment.
But that doesn't matter, because tonight, I'm hosting Raw!
But yes, in general, the idea, I don't know what the hell they were aiming for, but they got a bunch of celebrities I just never heard of before. Also, sometimes the lower card heels were made to look like the biggest idiots, and it wasn't helping anyone. I mean, poor Chavo, he came to Raw as a somewhat respected mid-carder, but after 5 months, he was the biggest jobber on the show, and he was losing to Hornswoggle of all people. He'd always come out and get his ass beat by Snoop Dogg or Cedric the Entertainer. It was just embarrassing for him. And in Kevin, he's pranking Chavo. He was always the butt of jokes, and Hornswoggle never struggled to beat him up. Like, even though Chavo would shove him down or something, Chris Masters will make the save or whatever. I don't know whether Chavo sneezed in front of Vince or something, but the whole Hornswoggle arc lowered his stock in the company. Anyways, I just want to move on from it. That is one of the worst stories of 2009. Hell, it might be the worst. Before moving on, I think I'm going to have to dive into every guest host for a video. Hell, maybe even videos. I might even go the one where Jeremy Piven hosted, the one where Batista hosted, whatever. I might even have to do an entire series based on this guest host era thing. I don't know, if you guys want a video or an entire series, just tell me. I'll cover each episode, whatever. Okay, moving on, let's talk about the Divas division. Now, the whole women's division had issues following Trish and Lita's departure. Like, they never got promos for their matches on pay-per-view for the most part. You'd often forget who was the number one contender. I will say, however, that I like the matches Beth, Melina, and Mickey occasionally had. And in terms of pure wrestlers, the Raw roster of 09-10 had a handful. Beth left later on. She left in October. Melina transferred in October. And Mickey ended up leaving for SmackDown also. After those two left, there was Melina, Maurice Gelkim, and Alicia Fox. Kelly and Eve were slowly developing, and the whole division wasn't that memorable, to be honest. There was some decent matches here and there, but in terms of stories, all I remember is Maurice criticizing Gail Kim in French, that's all. Also, the Bellas were always thrown to the guest host. Doesn't matter if it's Snoop Dogg or David Otunga, they always had them latch onto the host. Another thing to mention is that the Divas were paired with each other in those multi-woman matches. Remember those? Oh, we don't have time for you. And they throw them into these short-ass matches. In general, a lot of the stuff was unmemorable, but some of these Divas and some of the stuff in this era is actually overlooked, in my opinion. It's not just, oh, Divas after Trish were trash. Nah, that's kind of disrespectful. They weren't putting on clinics, and sure, there was some botches, but still, there was some stuff there. So we got the Divas division out of the way. Compared to 08-09, it was pretty weak. I mean, this match in itself lasted 17 seconds. The two entrances combined lasted longer than the match. Hell, one of the entrances is probably longer. Okay, next up, the lower card scene. I already mentioned Hornswoggle, but other than that, there was Santino, who I personally like. There was one storyline, though, that overstayed its welcome the second it began, and that was Santino. Now, I gotta mention the fact that the storyline did start before Backlash and before the draft, but it crept into this time period for a couple of months. Story goes, Santino's sister, ends up winning the Battle Royal at WrestleMania 25. Divas Battle Royal, I should note. This led to a little story between himself, Beth, and Rosa. That turned into a whole other thing with Vicky Guerrero, and a couple of weeks later, he's fired by the new owner of Raw, Donald Trump. Following this, he reverted to his normal self and almost back to normal from this point. He'd have some hilarious moments occasionally, be it with a guest host or with the wrestlers themselves. Santino never took himself seriously, and it made for some good stuff, honestly. Like, I underappreciated him back then, to be honest. Next up, I'd like to mention one of the most obscure face turns I've ever seen. Chris Masters' face turn. So the guy returns after Randy Orton puts in a good word for him, right? Problem with this return is the fact that he was just there. And another thing I should know is that he actually improved in the ring. Like, you should go watch his matches from Superstars if you doubt it. Anyways, on one cold November night, Chris Masters showed off his hidden talent, shaking his boobs to the tune of Crazy Train. This slowly turned him into a babyface, and the turn would be cemented when he saved Hornswoggle and Eve from the very scary Chavo Guerrero. There was also a Boom Boom Pow version of it too. The whole thing was random, and Chris's face turn didn't really increase his stock, although it probably increased his stock by like 2% or something like that. I don't remember anything he did after the face turn, other than hang out with Eve, and that's all. Another lower card talent to mention is Jillian. Unlike others though, she actually won a title, the Divas title. It's a weird fact that I never really knew until recently, and that's because it lasted one night. Her appearances on the show during this time period were most memorable for annoying whoever the guest host was. She was pretty talented in the ring, but was seen as a joke to her with singing gimmick. In this instance, she's trying to get to Timbaland and trying to sing to him the song Give It To Me, and he just didn't want to hear her. You know, she was always annoying the guest host. Doesn't matter if it's a country star, rap star, hip-hop star, artist, producer. She was always there, annoying them, blowing their ears out. Doesn't matter. That's what she was doing around this time period. I thought it was essential to mention her because, well, for good or bad, there's one thing that sticks to my mind about 09-10 Raw. Okay, moving on from the lower carders, let me mention the mid-carders. First of all, Jack Swagger. I thought he was decent as the jock heel or whatever. He showed more character compared to his future runs and had some good matches. It looked like he had a bright future because, well, for one, WWE was trying to push the hell out of him. But after he bombed as the world champion, that's a whole other story. Like I said, he wasn't bad for me before the whole title reign thing. I thought it was a decent heel. I just don't understand why they took away what was left of his character before when he became champion. Okay, next up is MVP. Oh man, just looking at this guy's face turn, I don't understand how you don't make a star out of him. He was for a fact over with the crowd. He had a little US title run and was ready to move on to bigger and better things. Do I mean, oh, make him champion? No, have him face the bigger guys and slowly climb up. One thing though that was holding him back was the fact that he couldn't tour internationally, I guess, because of his criminal past, and so he was stuck in the mid-card. Despite this, he was always connected to the crowd. He had a partnership with Mark Henry, who I'll get into in a moment. He had a little program with The Miz, but it didn't lead to much. Overall, MVP was pretty good around this time period. I just think it's unfortunate that time passed him by. I think if he was this over in 2007, they would have made him champion. As for Mark Henry, I thought he had a cool face turn. On the first night he debuts right out of the gate, he comes in and makes an impact. He trolls Orton, making him think that he's not going to face him in the gauntlet match, but ends up whooping his ass and winning clean, although Orton did face Evan Morton beforehand. It was a great first impression and set the stage for his Raw run. Problem once again, expectations were probably too high. He soon found himself in a tag team with MVP that was capable of winning the tag team gold, but they didn't because Jericho were just that much better, and his run consisted of losing, smiling to the crowd. But yes, he was a solid mid-carder. He wasn't exactly a jobber. He wasn't losing all the time. He was losing occasionally, but still, he could have been a good upper mid-carder in my opinion. Okay, before I continue to mentioning other mid-carders, I have to talk about the tag team division. Now, for some reason throughout this time period of Raw, the tag team division mostly consisted of paired superstars. Teams that were formed randomly. MVP and Mark, Jericho, DX, although that might be a technicality. Sheamus came up later on also, and the only tag teams that were on Raw throughout 09-10, pure tag teams were Carlito and Primo, who I should know disbanded in July, and Rhodes and DiBiase. It was very thin in that area, and explains why the titles were unified in the first place. The Hard Dynasty ended up joining right before the draft, so there's that. Despite this, I enjoyed Jericho and DX's runs in the division. Maybe it's the star power, maybe it's the matches they had, maybe it's a combination of both. Yeah, in general, the tag team division was dominated by Jericho and DX. They had some cool matches with Crime Time. They had some cool matches with DX, Rey Mysterio, and Batista. I liked some of the stuff in the tag division, but it was very thin if you notice. Anyways, moving on, I'd like to mention Evan Bourne, Matt Sydal. I think the guy's ridiculously talented. Sure, I don't really mind him on the mic or anything like that, but back then, he was one of the coolest stars for me. There was nobody, and I mean nobody like him in WWE at the time. His moveset was filled with unorthodox moves. He sold to make his opponents look like $1 million, and I don't think anybody expected him to be world champion. But back then, it seemed like he had a very bright future. Also, this guy brought back the shooting star press to the WWE. His theme song, once again, SVR 2011, memorable, and I'm glad he found a big stage to showcase his skills nowadays. So for him, positive in my eyes of this era of Raw. Next up, Rhodes and DiBiase. Back then, a bunch really thought that DiBiase Jr. was the star of the two. It sounds weird just saying it right now, and that's how it was perceived. Everyone believed Cody was going to be left behind, but once he debuted the dashing character, all those doubts went away. But during 09-10 Raw, their team legacy, they developed greatly. under the tutelage of Randy Orton. Cody and Ted were pushed pretty hard. Their matches with DX are some really good or hell great stuff for me. They felt very comfortable with DX in there and made the most out of the opportunity. Other than that, they probably should have gotten a tag title run to be seen as more legit. I know they beat DX, but if the Colognes were champions, couldn't the team who was more notable at the time win them? But yes, the team, they were developing greatly. I do think they should have had a run. I will say, however, that they stood no chance against Orton at WrestleMania. I'll dive into that story soon, but one thing to know is that they fell off hard during the Legacy breakup, especially Ted. I mean, they had to give him freaking Virgil and Maurice to try and get something out of him. Overall, I like that team when they feud with DX. Other than that, they had their moments, but Orton was the clear star of the team despite already being a main eventer. Okay, next up, Donald Trump purchasing Raw. This was something that came right out of the blue. So in June of 2009, Vince McMahon reveals that he sold Raw. To whom, you might ask? Donald Trump. Why? Because he made a profit in the process of doing so. It's weird to think in kayfabe that he sold the brand because, well, it's under the WWE umbrella, but whatever, you gotta accept these things to watch. The fans were happy about the business decision, but Trump quickly wanted to start things with a bang. Raw the next week will be commercial free. It feels weird to think about because, for one, they lost money, and two, it's commercial free. Like, just think about that. The stocks took a little hit despite this obviously being a storyline. As for the commercial free show, it featured one of the best versions of a Triple H and Orton match, which turned out to be better than the match they were promoting between both men on pay-per-view. A very entertaining promo between Miz and Cena, where Cena put Miz in his place. Hell, the show even drew a 4.2 rating, which was the highest in over a year. Scratch that, highest since the 15th anniversary episode of Raw. Anyways, Vince had second thoughts and wanted to buy back Raw. They had some weird segments on the outside. Vince was getting embarrassed, his limo had some issues, and he refused to walk to the arenas despite the short distance. Santina got fired by Trump, and Vince slowly got desperate and tried to get back his show. He ended up having to pay double to get his show back. Basically, Trump played and conned McMahon into selling Raw and purchasing it back for double. Also, in kayfabe, Trump had infinite money because he wanted to have commercial-free shows on a weekly basis. Not only that, but full-on refunds to everyone in the arena. It doesn't matter if it's MSG, doesn't matter if it's freaking the Continental Airlines Arena, he will give a free show. That crowd, I believe, was treated to a free show. I'm not sure, though. After McMahon got his show back, he fired Donald Trump. It was a bizarre segment, but one thing I learned from this was the fact that this is where the guest host idea originated from. Because Trump announced, from now on, there's going to be a guest host every week. That's where it came from. Okay, next up, Sheamus. I honestly never really seen someone become such a big deal in such a short time like this guy. Brock Lesnar, he actually went through a bunch of legends in order to get to the title. Sheamus, meanwhile, went through Jamie Noble and Jerry Lawler. I remember at the time, I thought it was going to be a one-and-done job, or Cena beats him and that's all. So when Sheamus beat Cena in a botchy finish, everyone was speechless. Even looking at it now, it has this weird feeling like, what the hell? Now, the problem with the finish was the fact that it felt like Cena lost the title, not Sheamus won it. Oh, it was a mistake. Cena fell off the turnbuckle onto the table. I think if he emphatically sent Champ through the table, it would have been well received. Also, there was a rumor at the time that Sheamus was Triple H's gym buddy, and he may have played a part in him winning the title, and that didn't help. You know, some fans were like, oh, he didn't deserve to win the title. He's buddies with Triple H. Also, the problem with this title reign was the booking. The guy kicked John Cena's ass for a month, but now he's champion. He's a chicken. Every time he faced the top guy, DQ loss or DQ win. I would say it hurt him in the long run. Maybe had they did the opposite, you know, swap the Triple H feud with Cena and then have him face Cena after WrestleMania, would it have worked? I don't know, but what do you guys think about this title run? I thought it was weak. I covered in this video, you know, I went through its run and how he retained the title by DQ every single time. But yeah, I thought it was a weak run that didn't help Sheamus at all. It hurt him, as a matter of fact. Next up, Jericho. Oh man, I really love this run. You can tell from my voice in this video. But in general, I loved how despite the limited competition, they made the tag title such a big deal that they actually made events in a pay-per-view with them. Sure, that might have been because of DX, but still, you have to acknowledge the fact that Jericho got the titles to the main event scene. They kind of did. The dynamics, the arrogance, everything about this team, I just loved it. Big Show comes in, knocks the hell out of JTG or whoever, and they retain the titles. Jericho gets his ass saved every single time. I liked it. They even had an emotional breakup. Around December or January 2010, Chris Jericho was desperately trying to find a way back on Raw since he was a SmackDown star, and Big Show at one point just told him to let it go. He eventually came back and fought for the titles once again, but after that, he was completely gone. He eventually found his way back in April by getting drafted to the brand, and I would say he was my MVP for 2009-10 Raw, but he wasn't even an official member of the roster, so he can't count. Big Show, he teamed up with Miz for only 2 months before turning babyface and getting drafted to SmackDown himself. Next up, Kofi Kingston. This guy came from out of nowhere. I always thought he was cool. I always find it sad that he was so close to the WWE Championship but was quickly pushed away. Like I said in that Survivor Series video, if you can make it in MSG, you can make it anywhere. Unfortunately, though, his push went straight to the recycle bin for 9 years. Overall, Kofi had some of the best matches during this era of Raw. It's a shame that he fell to the mid-card due to one issue. Then again, it made Kofi Mania that much sweeter. I mean, the feeling I got from watching that match back in 2019, it was very special to see this guy that you've seen, like, from the beginning rise all the way up to the top. There's not that many stars like that. Edge, his rise to the top was just tremendous. That's how it felt with Kofi, you know. He comes in 2008, 11 years later, after winning every single title, barring the WWE Championship, finally captures it. Okay, upper mid-card main event scene, here we go. First off, I want to mention Randy Orton. The guy was red hot in 09. Obviously, some of that momentum fizzled out due to Triple H, but he was still one of the best things on the show after winning the title. He took out Batista, continued the Triple H feud, but then he met John Cena. The feud itself was pretty promising. I mean, both men faced off in a classic at SummerSlam 2 years earlier, but for me, for the most part, I never felt this one. Their SummerSlam match was annoying. Breaking Point was a classic to me. Hell in a Cell was heatless, despite being in a cell. And their Iron Man match actually turned out to be my favorite match of the series. Hell, it might even be my favorite Iron Man match, as weird as it may sound. They traded the title back and forth, and I feel WWE are tryhards with this one, you know. Like Austin and Rock, they're trying so desperately to make this the next Austin and Rock, and it just wasn't working. The whole main event scene of 2009 was back and forth between Triple H, Cena, and Orton. Sheamus didn't come until the end of the year. There was some matches in there that were pretty good, but yes, the main event scene was very thin, and that's why I believe they tried out Sheamus and Kofi at the end. SmackDown, on the other hand, from April to April had Jeff Hardy, CM Punk, Edge, Chris Jericho, The Undertaker, Rey Mysterio. They all swapped spots. And I didn't even mention Batista, who probably would have helped with Raw had he not gotten injured in June. That's one thing many don't mention about the main event scene. It would have looked a lot different had Dave never gotten hurt. I mean, think about it. Even if Triple H does team up with HBK to form DX, where does Batista go? Surely he has to feud with Randy or John or somebody, right? Before I get to Batista, though, Orton ended up feuding with Legacy and actually turning face, which I find weird if you look at it. I think they made it as if Rhodes and DiBiase were spoiled brats or something, they were greedy or whatever, and he whooped their asses before embarking on his first face run in 6 years. At that time, I actually liked him more than Cena, who for some reason I started disliking. But yes, Randy Orton character-wise, he had a great year. He was always one of the main focuses of Raw. And while the Orton and Cena feud did have some good matches, I don't know. Something was off about it, in my opinion. 2 of those matches are actually some of my favorites of 2009, but something was off. At least that's what I felt. Okay, next up is DX. You know, for as much flack as they receive for shilling their products and the whole Hornswoggle thing, DX's stories were pretty good for the most part, in my opinion. First of all, both men were in their final run. Michaels permanently, whereas Triple H went part-time following this. I love the fact that despite having fun and enjoying life, a little part of HBK still wanted to avenge his loss from WrestleMania. Triple H, on the other hand, could still put on entertaining matches. There's some gems being singles or tag involving him from this time period. And as for the Hornswoggle thing, I don't know why in the hell they got him to join the group. It led to that little score thing that was so random. And he eventually joined them as a little mascot. They had the tag titles and finally defended them on SmackDown, which I loved because HBK on SmackDown is like finding a unicorn. His story with The Undertaker was truly special, and that's my favorite WrestleMania match probably. Triple H had a little thing with Sheamus, and he kind of put him over in the end, although he returned the favor about a year later. So yeah, DX 09 and 10. They were trying to get the nostalgia pop, but some of their stories were pretty good in my opinion. Okay, next up is Batista the Animal. The resurgence that dreams are made of. Initially in the 09-10 season, Batista was a babyface. He was getting ready to have another run with the title, but suffered yet another injury. Upon his return, he sent to SmackDown and returned into a heel, and when I tell you it was a complete 180, I mean it. He found his groove again, and what do you know? He becomes WWE Champion and is back on Raw. Seriously, Batista's heel run is really one of the very best runs from someone I've seen in the PG era. The way he talked, the elegant words he used, the way he whined, you know, duct tape, are you kidding me? Such a short, tremendous run that I think would have helped 2010 WWE had he stayed. Like, I could just imagine him ditching Cena, leaving him alone with a Nexus at SummerSlam or something. Shame it didn't last that long because Batista didn't like the direction the product was going. Also, trust me, the remake will be on its way. I will eventually do it. The feud with Cena, despite being one-sided in terms of match results, was so good. Every week, Cena was getting his ass kicked, and Batista was giving out quotable promos, you know, kissing babies, hugging fat girls, and he actually had his reasons for being frustrated with WWE's choices regarding face of the company, you know. He thought the company was out to get him. Okay, I better transition quickly before this becomes a heel Batista video. Next up, Bret the Hitman Hart. Okay, you know the moment he came back, it's always something I'll remember. Hitman wasn't from my era, but I watched a bunch of his matches on YouTube, and I was under the belief that he was never coming back. Too much heat from both sides. So when Vince announced his return, it was like, it has to be true, right? I didn't used to go on the dirt sheets then, I just hadn't discovered them yet. So he comes out on the first Raw of 2010. Never forget it. Looking back on it, it's annoying to hear a remix version of his theme song, but whatever, Hitman's back. We get to see him speak in a WWE ring for the first time in 12 years, and hell, a moment nobody thought they would ever see. Shawn and Bret hugged. They buried the damn hatchet. Surreal stuff in general. By the end of the night, Vince kicked him in the balls to begin a feud. I'd prefer we not talk about that story match right now because, well, it's on my mind, for the future. But stuff like Miz and Bret in the ring were impossible to think about at one point for good or for bad. Also, that Vince story did need a conclusion despite how terrible the match was. And I think it would have worked had they done some kind of tag match or something like that. He also ended up becoming GM. And all in all, I don't know what everyone was expecting from Bret's return, but it was all worth it to see him once again in the ring. Okay, following Bret Hart, I gotta mention John Cena, obviously. It was during this run where Champ was getting hated a lot. Super Cena was in full force, and if he wasn't champion, he was fighting for it. Hell, during 09-10, there wasn't a single feud Cena had that didn't involve the title. I don't consider the Miz thing a feud, though, because, well, he whooped his ass in like 5 minutes. There was some good stuff in there involving Cena. The Batista thing was awesome. 2 of the Orton matches to me were classics. And some of the matches he had on Raw were gems, but yes, he was winning a lot. That's a big reason as to why Raw of this era was hated. As a matter of fact, it's number 2 or number 1 reason why. If you ask someone, why do you hate Raw 2009-10 so much? Guest host or Super Cena? Now, before I mention my MVP of this era, I'd like to talk about the ratings and the additional talent from ECW. First of all, the ratings were sky high following the draft. You'd find ways to get 3.6, 3.9, 4.0, and the summer was pretty consistent also. Once fall came around, the ratings were around 3.1 to 3.6. Rumble and Mania season were strong. They fell below 3.5 only on 3 occasions. Post-Mania, it was around 3.2. So basically, the whole guest hosting and Cena in the main event didn't really turn off many people if you look at it from a rating standpoint. As a matter of fact, nowadays, the ratings are falling way harder than they were during the guest host era. I mean, look at post-WrestleMania 34 to post-WrestleMania 35. I remember thinking that was a shocking fall because, well, everyone turns up for post-Mania Raw, right? Those were the ratings back in 09-10. They were pretty consistent for the most part. They didn't fall hard until after WrestleMania 26 and into 2011. That's when they started falling. Anyways, moving on, the ECW acquisitions. Okay, after the Tuesday night brand closed down, a couple of stars made their way to Raw. Goldust, Yoshitatu, William Regal, and Christian. You may not remember this, but Christian was actually on Raw for like 2 months. The guys didn't really have much time to show what they were capable of because after only 2 months, some of them were drafted to SmackDown. Despite this, some of that talent did help enhance the roster quality, if only for a couple of weeks. And to this day, I still think Captain Charisma should have won Money in the Bank and cashed in on Edge. With that said, the talent did give some fresh matches, and I remember thinking Yoshitatu was going to be a star. So yeah, I'd say this one was a positive because he added to the Raw roster, And lastly, I'd like to mention my MVP of 09-10 Raw. It might be a hot take, but while making this video, I thought he was the right choice. The Miz. Why did I pick him? He was without a doubt the most improved star of 2009 in general, be it SmackDown, Raw, or ECW, hell, maybe even Impact also. I think everyone felt Morrison was the clear star of the team. Not sure though, please correct me on this one. But I just remember at the time thinking Morrison was going to be the bigger guy. So Miz debuts on Raw, he calls out John Cena like 10 times, and once Cena finally responds, he kicks his ass in 5 minutes. It was an embarrassing match for him, because for months Cena this, Cena that, and he didn't make good on his word. Then he gets banned from Raw, masks himself as the Calgary Kid, and finds a way to regain a contract. This time, though, he ditches the shorts in favor of the trunks, and it's like the moment he wore the trunks, Vince wanted to push him. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what happened. He becomes U.S. champion about a month and a half later, has some memorable promos, and is featured consistently as a pretty big deal. By the end of this Raw run, The Miz had the United States Championship and the Unified Tag titles by his side, and he was also feuding with Bret Hart. And I mean, that feud wasn't good, but it showed how much the company valued him. Other than Miz, Chris Jericho would have been a contender, but the guy wasn't even on the roster. I don't know, if you want Jericho to be your MVP, go ahead. But yeah, he probably is. He was probably the very best thing on Raw. But in terms of a superstar from the brand, I'd say The Miz. John Cena, Orton, they could be contenders in your eyes. Orton had a great year, tremendous year. But yes, The Miz was the standout of 09-10 for me, because in 1 year, he became near main event quality. Okay, that's Raw 2009-10. My opinion on the show did change after making the video. There was some good there, but the guest hosting and Cena winning all the time put a damper, I guess. The cringe-ass segments, stuff felt outdated. It felt weird. Jerry Lawler shilling for the guest host, remember? Oh, it's this guy. I just don't like it. Obviously, though, there was some cool ones like Shaq and Bob Barker. They increased the quality of the show when they're on there. Also, do any of you remember this?
I've rigged this entire place with explosives. And isn't that right, R-Truth? What's up?
Anyways, I do have some good memories of this era of Raw. I remember the build-up to WrestleMania 26 being so damn fun. It had this amazing feeling to it, all the big stars coming back one more time. And in terms of WrestleMania build-ups, it's one of my favorites. So yeah, what do you guys think of Raw 2009-10? Please comment down below. Me personally, there was some bad, obviously, but there was some good, like every other era. It might be the worst thing to you. To me, it's not the worst thing, to be honest, though. So yeah. What do you guys think? Please comment down below. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit an RKO on the like button and perhaps an AA on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.